Welcome to The Explainer. I am so excited to dig into today's topic with you. As a neuroscientist, I want to start off by pointing out a reality that's, well, it's as undeniable as it is totally strange. Think about it. You were born. You opened your eyes for the very first time, you heard your mother's voice, you tasted food, took those wobbly first steps, spoke your first words. I mean, you lived an entire, vibrant, incredibly formative life before the age of 3. And yet, you remember literally none of it. Not a single moment. So today, we're going to conduct a biological autopsy on your lost past.
I want you to really confront your own missing history for a second here. It's effectively a missing persons case, right? And the missing person is you. Where did those years actually go? Now, most people just assume the answer is super simple. Oh, my baby brain was just too young. It wasn't ready to hit record yet. But as we're about to see, the real answer is far stranger, far more violent, and honestly far more fascinating than just a simple lack of capability. We are literally about to investigate a biological crime scene.
It was actually Sigmund Freud who first put a formal name to this phenomenon way back in 1905. He called it infantile amnesia, and it basically defines our total inability to retrieve episodic memories from before we were about 2 to 4 years old. But right off the bat, we need to absolutely dismantle the most common misconception out there. Your baby brain was not failing to record your life. It didn't just lack the processing power. It was actually recording everything. Your early memories were very much there, but something destroyed them. Section 1, the phenomenon and the proof. Let's dive right in. So to understand how our memories were erased, we obviously first have to prove they existed in the first place, right? Let's look at the behavioral evidence that proves infant brains absolutely do record memories. Back in the 1980s, a psychologist named Carolyn Rovey Collier over at Rutgers University ran this beautifully elegant experiment. She took a simple ribbon and tied it from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging right above their crib. Now, these babies quickly figured out that when they kicked their little leg, the mobile moved above them, and they absolutely loved it. But the real genius of the experiment came next. She took the babies away and brought them back days later to see what would happen. And you know what? They remembered. They started kicking immediately. Even tiny 2-month-old babies could hold on to that memory for a couple of days. So the absolutely crucial point here is this. By the time these babies were 6 months old, they remembered that ribbon trick for weeks. Weeks! Infant brains can learn. They can store information. They can recall it. The baby's hard drive was absolutely writing and storing data. It was not failing to record. But those memories just don't last into adulthood. So why? Section 2, the structural suspect. Your immature hippocampus. To answer why those early memories just vanish, we need to look directly at the brain's biological hardware. Now, for decades, scientists chased the primary engine of memory formation. Deep inside your brain, there's this small, curved structure called the hippocampus. In an adult brain, the hippocampus works with the prefrontal cortex to effectively tag, store, and retrieve long-term episodes. It's the exact thing that lets you remember a birthday party or, a rainy walk in the park. But in an infant brain, this circuitry is incredibly underdeveloped. Specifically, there's a key region called the dentate gyrus, which acts as the ultimate gateway for new memories. Well, that gateway isn't fully wired up until you're somewhere between 2 and 4 years old. So while your infant brain could totally form short-term memories, it physically lacked the mature wiring to move them into long-term storage. Section 3, the plot twist, the eraser inside your head. But you see, an unwired hippocampus is really only half the story here. And honestly, what comes next is pretty much the plot twist of the century. In 2014, 2 neuroscientists up in Toronto, Sheena Jocelyn and Paul Franklin, made a discovery that totally flipped our understanding of infant memory on its head. They literally discovered the eraser inside your brain. They proposed this hypothesis that, frankly, sounded completely absurd at the time. They were looking at neurogenesis. Now, neurogenesis is the process where your brain produces brand new neurons at a massive, just extraordinary rate during this first few years of life to wire up your circuits. And their wild hypothesis was this. What if the very process that builds your brain is the exact same thing that destroys your memories? To test this crazy idea, the researchers used mice. And the results, which were published in the journal Science, were absolutely staggering. When they artificially ramped up neurogenesis in adult mice, basically forcing their adult brains to grow rapidly, those adult mice suddenly started forgetting things they already knew. It's wild. And then when they did the opposite, when they slowed down neurogenesis in infant mice, those infant mice actually held on to their memories way longer than normal. The biology was crystal clear. Every single time a new neuron physically integrates into an existing brain circuit, it actually disrupts and overwrites the connections that were already sitting there. And this brilliantly illustrates the reality of what was happening to you. Your baby brain wasn't too weak, it was just way too busy growing. Your earliest experiences weren't lost because they were never saved in the first place. They were lost because your brain kept building new rooms and tearing down the old walls in the process. The biological cost of building the incredibly complex brain you're using today was the absolute total destruction of your earliest memories. Section 4, the missing witness, the birth of the self. But we can't just look at the biological hardware, right? We also have to look at the psychological software that's required to actually keep a memory alive. We have to look for the missing witness. Back in the late 1990s, developmental psychologists Mark Howe and Mary Courage made this really vital argument. They said that to form an autobiographical memory, the kind of memory where you can actually replay an event in your mind, you need to be the main character of that event. You have to understand that you exist as a distinct person, totally separate from the world around you. Basically, you need a continuous sense of self. And before about 18 to 24 months of age, infants literally do not have this. There is simply no narrator inside their head yet. So how do we know exactly when that self is actually born? Well, it comes down to one of the most famous and honestly most delightful milestones in developmental psychology, the classic Rouge mirror test. Just imagine putting a tiny, completely harmless dot of red makeup on a baby's nose and then sitting them right in front of a mirror. What do you think happens? The results are incredibly consistent every time. Before 18 months, babies look in that mirror and they treat the reflection like it's a completely different child. They might wave at it or try to play with it, but right around 18 months, something absolutely magical happens. They look in the mirror, they see the red dot, and they reach up and touch their own nose. They suddenly recognize, oh, that's me. And that exact moment, that birth of self-recognition, perfectly tracks with the earliest age that autobiographical memories can even begin to form. You literally can't remember being a baby, partly because, psychologically speaking, there was no you there yet to experience it.
Section 5, the final framework, language and culture.
Now, we have one final crucial element required to save a memory from the eraser of time. And this comes from the fascinating research of developmental psychologist Catherine Nelson. Think about it. Before you could speak, you experienced the whole world in these incredibly intense, raw sensory impressions. Light, sound, texture, emotion. But Nelson concluded that language doesn't just describe our memories, it actually structures them. She has this quote that is just profound. She says, "Without language, experiences are like water with no container. They exist in the moment, then they're gone." Without words to give a memory a sort of skeleton, to build a narrative out of all that raw data, those sensory impressions just completely wash away. And what's truly mind-blowing is that we can actually see this play out in the data. Research from Cornell psychologist Chi Wong shows that the age of your earliest memory actually changes depending on the culture you happen to grow up in. For example, in Western cultures, where parents frequently interrogate their kids about their day to help build narratives, early memories start around age 3.5. But look at the Maori people of New Zealand. Their culture places such a profound, deep emphasis on oral tradition and personal history that their children's average first memory reaches all the way back to age 2.5. Meanwhile, in East Asian cultures, where early storytelling focuses a lot less on the individual, those first memories often don't kick in until age 4 or even later. Your culture's storytelling habits literally dictate how far back your own brain can reach. How crazy is that? The final section, the costs of becoming you. So, as we wrap up our biological autopsy here, let's assemble all the pieces. It wasn't just one single thing that caused your infantile amnesia. It was everything, all happening all at once. An undeveloped hippocampus failed to build that long-term bridge. Aggressive neurogenesis tore through your existing circuits like an absolute bulldozer. A lack of self-recognition meant there was no main character to anchor the events, and a lack of language meant there was no container to hold the water. But here's the really empowering realization I want you to take away from all of this. Losing your early memories was not a biological failure. Your brain wasn't too weak. It was actually doing something vastly, vastly more important than merely remembering. It was physically rewiring itself to construct the intricate, thinking, feeling person who is watching this explainer right now. The loss of your past was simply the necessary destructive cost of building your future. Which leaves us with one final, maybe slightly uncomfortable, but deeply profound philosophical question to chew on. If you had no continuous sense of self back then, and the brain that held your earliest sensory experiences was quite literally disassembled and rebuilt, neuron by neuron, to create the person you are today,
Is the baby in your old photo albums actually you? Or is it someone else entirely? A sort of prequel to your existence who had to be destroyed so that you could live? I'm going to let you ponder that one. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I absolutely cannot wait to dive into our next topic together.